Good evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's program, Abilities Dance Boston, the field of dance from the past to the present. My name is Helen Liu, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like tonight's event to you. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Ellice Patterson is the founder, executive, and artistic director of Abilities Dance, a Boston-based dance company that welcomes artists across the nation with and without disabilities. She's also the executive director of BalletRox, providing dance education to Boston youth facing the most systemic inequalities at our after-school location and across many public schools, private schools, and more in Boston. Outside of self-produced abilities dance shows, her choreography has appeared in the MFA, Lynx Hall in Chicago, Gibney Dance in NYC, the series Volume 4 at the Ailey City Group Theater in New York City, and more. Our conversation this evening will be moderated by Noah Stang Osborne, who identifies as they, he. Noah is a speaker, activist, member of Lex Pride's board of directors, and art therapy student at Wellesley University. Noah holds several identities: multiracial, Black, disabled, trans, non-binary, and queer. Please join me in welcoming Ellice and Noah.
Thank you for the introduction. Ellice, you've devoted so much energy and passion to the field of dance. What do you love about dance?
I love that dance is a really great medium that comes from expressing within our bodies, that the tool is our bodies as opposed to other forms where there might be an instrument or a paintbrush or what have you, and that it's really coming from you and your spirit, and that that kind of leads out into the stage or field or wherever you are. And to be able to use what you have to create powerful stories, I think is a wonderful way to express work.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little about how the field of dance has evolved over the years from an inclusivities perspective.
I think the field has definitely evolved in some ways, and in some ways it still hasn't. But I think that in more recent decades, we've been starting to see an emergence of not just diverse choreographers and dancers who are telling work, but also including stories that come from a number of different marginalized identities. And in that sense, I think that the field has certainly evolved from 10 years ago to 5 years ago, and that we're still continuing to evolve. Certain larger, well-resourced spaces, that inclusivity still has a long way to go. And I think it's part of that, having that infrastructure in place that makes it difficult or uneasy to change. But I think that the more emergence of diverse voices and diverse-led organizations that are supporting that work, the more that we'll continue to see a complete evolution of inclusivity.
What myths or stereotypes have made it hard for a greater diversity of people to succeed in dance?
I think that a myth is that you have to be able to hit certain benchmarks as far as being able to lift your leg this high or have a perfect turnout of your feet. That have been hallmarks in the past of great dancers, but in realizing the damage that that can do to some bodies, a lot of bodies long term, as well as just knowing that not everybody can do that, but that doesn't mean that they cannot create powerful stories. And I think that is a myth that is being broken down for sure. And I think that another myth is probably just that dance technique overall has a set form, and that there are other organizations like ours and not like ours who are starting to really think about in ballet, what is a first position, what is a second position, and breaking down those key elements to then make it applicable to a wider number of bodies than, say, the traditional first position or second position might have been. So I think that that myth of what is first position and what are these elements of dance that are very rigid in the past are starting to kind of evolve as well.
Thanks. Abilities Dance seems like a model of inclusion. Could you tell us more about your company?
So we have in our company 2 different programs. Our performing company, which are adult artists with diverse identities within and outside of the disabled community that are paid for that work and have trained in different capacities and create productions and really become a beacon of representation for identities like theirs. And that goes beyond just dancer and choreographer, but also musicians and composers and a team of folk to make the work accessible, a costume designer for humans and mobility aids, a number of people that really drive these productions to be able to have this kind of multidisciplinary approach that is supporting the dance. To be able to have that equitable work opportunity as well for a lot of us who might not be able to get that work opportunity in other more not disabled or other dance companies. And our community engagement work, which is similar to this, where we give lectures or movement workshops for multi-generational, multiracial communities, and really tailoring our key points of equity to that audience. And that can range from talking to Girl Scouts and doing a movement workshop with them and how they can include more disabled girls and folks in their troop, to working with Fidelity and how our accessibility lessons are applicable to corporate America. And so really kind of understanding who space we're in and making the work applicable, as opposed to giving these kind of rigid points that may or may not be applicable to the work that they're doing or the people that are coming into their space. So both of those kind of work together to better promote intersectional disability rights in Greater Boston, because we always say that we have to take into account racial equity and LGBTQ rights and all of these different social justice movements in order for true liberation to happen. So we try to think of the approach that way. And also being led, I think, by the multiply marginalized identities I have, as well as our director of music, Andrew Cho, and having a larger percentage of women of color on our board. And I think all of that works together to have that mindset and leadership in place to be founded on and to create work that doesn't have the same kind of white supremacist or other discriminatory infrastructure, and to be really able to make the work go.
How has your personal mission or the organization's mission evolved over time?
I would say that our organizational mission definitely evolved to more articulate the intersectional component of our work. I think that realizing, even though with Andrew, for instance, we know that some of these elements were in the work, a lot of other folks didn't, because in general, a lot of social justice work has been kind of involving primarily one movement, and not thinking of how other movements can really play a part into that for those that are in those communities. And so I think that has been a very key shift for us to have that language out there and have that known, so that folks can understand more about that intersecting work that needs to happen in order to kind of dismantle some of these systems. And I think my personal mission has definitely been to stay rooted in the work, because it can be really challenging when interacting with spaces that are not as culturally competent and are used to seeing success in a certain way that might not be the way that we view success. And so having understanding of educating, but also not shifting and changing and taking time, realizing I have no time to try to break certain points down. So being able to have that too, and also rest. Something that I'm still working on, but trying to embrace radical rest still working on it, so I'll let you know. But I think that's another personal part of the mission to make sure I'm good.
Rest is so important. What led to you founding Abilities Dance, and were there any roadblocks along the way?
Yeah, I founded Abilities Dance when I couldn't find a space for myself in the Boston area to professionally perform. And also many dance studios were inaccessible, and teachers or choreographers weren't as competent in teaching for disabled bodies, and would often say, modify on your own in the corner without giving some understanding of how to work with the person to understand those modifications. So I think that those barriers definitely built up into wanting to create that space, and also to tell the stories that I wasn't seeing, that were very much a part of the different cultures that I was in, and also the cultures that the organization itself had members a part of that we just weren't seeing, and to be able to highlight those stories in a way that is from us, and that is rooted in equity and pushing equity and change in different capacities. Those were all the building blocks to get there.
We have a question in the Q&A that says, I relate to this idea that you have to educate without shifting in spaces that aren't as culturally competent. That sounds hard. What strategies do you use?
Yeah, I would first, I guess it depends on the space for sure. So understanding the space that I'm in, understanding if it is worth my time to educate or not, because that's also important too, making sure that you're not just educating for anyone and everyone, especially for free, and you be able to realize that kind of value there, or if that person really does have a genuine want to understand, and to work with them on that, and to, if it's say a funder perspective, for instance, really take time to understand some cultural points that they might not see in the grant, or they might not see in the work sample, or they might not have, because it's so a part of our world that it might be something that we just don't even think of to highlight. So really, and working with them to see where they are, and where we are, and what we're trying to do, and then also guiding them toward other resources for them to continue their own learning, or consultants, if in case they want to, really dive in and work with people from the community to be able to support them in that journey. And then, yeah.
Thanks. How has the need to shift to a more virtual world affected the work that you do, especially like during COVID?
I would say that it really wasn't a shift for us. We had already been virtual before COVID for years. We have artists that are located across the country, and so we've had virtual rehearsals happen for years. And when COVID happened, our kind of back-end process and the work that we do internally wasn't as big of a shift as just how we present that work to communities, and thinking about how to continue in live stream or pre-recorded work, and the values behind both of those, and connecting with other community spaces to do virtual talks like this, where we're in their communities without actually physically in their communities, and to connect over virtual that way. And it really created some great opportunities, since while other orgs and other dance companies are trying to start that, we kind of just springboarded from that point, and we're able to continue generating content for audiences and grow in that way, and do amazing projects. We partnered with a university in Sri Lanka, and our dancers and composers partnered with their student dancers and musicians, and created work virtually for a few months together, and across really well time zones, because 10 p.m. rehearsals are definitely a lot. And to be able to have conversations of culturally how our disability culture in the US versus Sri Lanka and resources there or not, and also create work together. So I thought that was definitely a powerful moment of the joy of where we're at now with internet and connecting and being able to continue connecting through work and through creation. And hopefully we'll be able to continue that post-COVID as well.
How did you start your partnership with the college in Sri Lanka?
A colleague of mine was actually on a Fulbright scholarship there and was working with their fine arts office, but they also had a number of folks that were disabled students that were there from a war a few years back where many people were impacted. And so having already some of those resources at hand in their College of Fine Arts, partnered with them to then work with us and kind of iron out the wild time zone questions and logistical things, and just building community and accepting mistakes as we go, but still building community through that process.
Cool. As a person with multiple identities that have historically been marginalized, how do you find community in the dance world, and how do you cope with rejection, microaggressions, and setbacks?
I would say that the biggest community is definitely both within our organization as well as the broader disabled dance field, having similar stories to commiserate over or to celebrate from, or being able to support one another's shows virtually or in person. They've definitely been key supporters for me to lean on as a director and to also share resources and dancers and experience and knowledge, and to be able to continue growing and building the field for sure. And then was dealing with setbacks. That's definitely almost daily thing. I think that in building a business and continuing to scale and grow it, there's always some form of a setback, and a lot of the times it is which but macroaggressions for sure, and to be able to kind of take space for myself to see if it's worth educating this person over, or if it's some type of value from the other organization, or if I just need to kind of heal myself and not, and to make sure I'm continually checking in with myself of how to best handle different situations for sure.
Thanks. Related to that, how do you deal with the myth that including people of varying abilities or other marginalized identities will somehow decrease the quality or beauty of dance?
I would say that dance has always been about the movement of the body and the articulation of that, and everybody has the capability to move and articulate in varying forms. And so it's really not what it detracts, but what it adds through being able to really be creative with within certain movement limitations or other identities in the community, as well as just adding culture back into dance to be able to add this element that might not be present had it not been for non-deaf or disabled audiences. So I think there's a lot to add for sure. And looking at if they're not able to do flips or leaps, that's not really thinking of dance as opposed to tricks.
Could you share a video of one of your rehearsals or performances?
Yeah, so I will share a video from our show coming up this Friday and Saturday. Hope you're able to attend. It is live and live streamed. So if you're able to attend live, it is from the Multicultural Arts Center in Cambridge, or if not, live stream from your homes, even better, where we are honoring different BIPOC and disabled artists and activists, past, present, and kind of taking their life journeys and advocacy into music and movement. And so one of those folks is Mark Travis Rivera. He is a disabled Latinx non-binary person who is currently based in Atlanta and has had about a decade in the field of dance to contribute all of those identities. And a lot of his work stems from love and kind of his first love in particular. And so I will show a clip from that. Caitlin and Jamie are New York dancers who are dancing this piece and who also danced with Mark years ago. So there's also that nice note of knowing the person. And I will show that. Yeah. I will pause there. So that is a piece that will be premiering this weekend that I'm definitely excited about. And then another thing that I like to have as a disclaimer, which I forgot to say beforehand, but our dancers have a variety of identities within the community, and that includes those disabilities that are not as apparent, disability identities that are part of the chronically ill, mental health, neurodivergent, and in general, just other identities that fall within the non-visible. Since I always like to share that when most people think of our work, they might be expecting folks in chairs, which we definitely have that, myself included, but we also have folks that are ambulatory users that might use different mobility aids. And so really showing the different identities and richness of our community for sure.
Thank you for sharing that clip. That was beautiful. We have another question from the audience. It reads, what forms of dance do you do at Abilities Dance? It sounds like some of what you do is to be flexible and creative with dance forms.
Yes, so our primary dance forms are ballet and modern based. But because I definitely am a collaborative creator and work with different dancers from different dance backgrounds, we've had a variety of identities come through over the years where they've kind of incorporated elements of their self, from Chinese classical to folk to hip hop to a variety of forms. So we kind of have that accessible ballet and modern base, and then kind of branch out based on who's in the room and the dance identities that we all have.
What is your greatest joy in your work with dance?
I would say the greatest joy is just the space to be able to create the work that I know is possible and can resonate that others might not want to. To be able to have that platform, offer it to others sometimes as well, let folks be able to really take ownership behind the work that they're creating and the overall direction, I think is the greatest joy to be able to have it start with just that original need and then branch out into spaces of joy that resonate for different folks in different ways.
Great. What advice do you have for people who are interested in pursuing dance, especially those who may not have felt comfortable in kind of traditional dance spaces?
I would say that for those that aren't interested in pursuing dance, or that for those that are interested in pursuing dance, that might not be comfortable. I think that if you put yourself out there and the first space isn't for you, to not let that hold you back and to assess what may or may not have worked in that space and what you learned from that, and using that to kind of influence the next space, try the next space. Since it definitely took me time to find spaces that allowed me to reintegrate into my body and to find different forms that worked, to be able to then kind of take that and add that space for others has definitely been a joy. And we're few and far between for sure, but there are other spaces out there on an educational and professional level. So to keep searching.
There's another question in the Q&A. It sounds like you collaborate a lot in developing a dance program. Do you and your dancers work together to choreograph your programs?
Yeah, so the choreography process is definitely largely directed by me, that allows dancers to kind of generate movement phrases within certain pieces and to be able to have conversations about and bring out elements of either the movement or the work overall that even I might not have realized and highlight. And outside of the dances, very collaborative with composers. Our Andrew is director of music and leads over a couple of composers that are on team. So we collaborate and I allow them kind of reign within a certain parameters of the type of music that we're looking for, and to collaborate back and forth on that. If we need extra time for adjustments or whatever it might be, to have that conversation that is continued throughout, as well as with our costume director, that is kind of like, let her do her thing and support whatever she comes up with, and other folks as well. Outside of just dance, that is a highly collaborative process and a back and forth conversation between all the parties.
Thanks. Is there anything that I have not covered, that you have not covered, that you'd like to talk about?
I would say that our work is amazing, but it's not the only one, and to continue to look at other organizations and other states and countries like ours to be able to learn more about the different dance backgrounds that are out there that might be great fits, or the different philosophies even. It's wide between all of us, but can always be more, and to just kind of jump in if that's of interest to you, or in general, just to find accessible spaces, especially during this time where a lot is virtual in dance, or in general, for what you might be looking for, and not stop finding that space.
Would anyone in the audience like to submit more questions for Ellice? Oh, yes, we have some more questions. How do you get funding for this work? Even typical arts groups are having difficulty these days.
Yeah, we have been lucky to be able to take advantage of some of the increased relief funds for arts organizations so that we can continue to do work during these times. Being creative by our virtual process, which cuts down on our rehearsal, but it fee bills, and other ways to be creative and innovative, to kind of keep costs down and make sure that our primary expense are the people and to make sure that people feel supported. Reaching out to supporters like yourselves and making appeals for donations for us to continue the work, and then just keeping on.
Nice.
Crank out a lot of grants.
Awesome. Another question from the audience is, do you collaborate with other dance companies or arts groups?
We actually have a guest artist coming in for Friday's show, Antoine Hunter, who identifies as a Black deaf dancer, and we are doing a duet together, which is going to be really great to kind of have really celebrate Black, deaf, and disabled love and joy, and to have that space as well, since some of our stories can be really hard, but to make sure folks know that it is not all just hard, and that there is joy in the community as well. And continue to guest teach as well at Access, which has a series of guest teachers that are virtual, so check them out if you're interested in virtual accessible classes from another disabled dance company. And I'm also teaching there, I think the 29th, maybe somewhere around there. So look up orgs that are doing works like ours, and that we're all kind of connected and at the very least know each other. So if there are other orgs that you are looking for, then it's to reach out and put you on the right path.
Great, thank you. Another question is, what was the most difficult challenge you faced in trying to create this safe dance space for all?
I would say the difficult challenge was getting those to really, funders in particular, to really get it. And since several didn't understand the impact or the need, or even just the cultural competency of why disabled dance or disabled dance exists. And so having to do that education and really invest time for the longer term gains that we've just recently started to take advantage of having the funds to support these well-deserved artists and the work that we do. So I think that was the biggest barrier, was just making sure that the folks funding other works know that we matter too, and that we are our own audience and customer base that is eager and hungry for this type of work, and that will show up. We just have the resources to turn the lights on. So.
Another audience question is, that's such a challenge to share the richness of a community's experience, not just the heartbreaks. How do you balance that, especially for mixed audiences?
Yeah, I would say that it's just really about showing as much as possible, and even in that, knowing that it's still a very small range that's being shown, and to be able to pick up on the different themes. For instance, our upcoming show, where it is mentioned we're doing a duet about Black, deaf, and disabled love and joy. We're also talking about medical trauma and the forced sterilizations of Indigenous women and Black women in Mississippi as well. And they're actually that piece in our mission, and the next piece as well, since that is a hard piece for a lot of folks, and especially since I know folks in the audience who experience that. So to really think of the importance of that heartbreak, if you will, that we're not just showing trauma for trauma's sake, but that there is an importance and a message behind this work, and also on the same hand showing the joy as well, so that you think that we are not all just about suffering and deficit, but also all of the fabulous things that we all bring across our diversity.
Someone asked, how do you get all the stories and content for your programs?
A lot of research. This past show, it was a mix of interviewing our living honorees and taking time to listen to and then digest their stories and words, and also their work as well. And for past activists that we're honoring, really diving into books and podcasts and different forms of information of that work, and to continuously be in a place of learning, since I love to read anyway. So definitely value research and getting as much richness from those pages or interviews to then reflect that in the work.
In your research, have you found any specific books or podcasts that you'd like to recommend?
I would say that I just read a book by Keisha Blaines and Tilbury Free, which is a research book about Daniela Hamer, who is a Black disabled activist from Mississippi. I'm also from Mississippi, and we actually have a shared connection point with someone in the book, but that's another story, another day. That was a very well written book to really highlight the presence of disability within racial equity work, which often gets, and civil rights work, which often gets left behind or omitted. I thought that was very well written. So many, really so many books that was coming at capitalism and disability. There are a number of books and resources out there, especially ones that are focusing on those intersectional components that are important to consider when doing other forms of equity work. So just kind of dive in. And if the person's from the community that is doing that writing, then you know that it's coming from a genuine place, and that there'll be a lot to learn from it.
Another audience question is, it sounds like you're able to do this work with integrity and authenticity to honor the stories. Do you ever run practice sessions to get feedback?
I do not, mainly because I am one of those. I also have another full-time executive director job outside of this, so I'm often kind of go until the last minute. I have a solo that I still need to do, so you know. It's yeah, I think with time, when I will actually transition into full-time over the summer, and that might be something interesting to engage. But the only other thing that is reviewed with our audio descriptions that I write, that Amber Piercy, our editor, edits and makes sure, since she identifies as blind and I do not, I'm making sure that I'm not putting my own biases into the audio descriptions. That's definitely important for me to make sure that I'm always acknowledging my own privileges, even within the community, and advocating for and creating resources for those folks as well.
Do you have programs for children and young adults? And if you do, how do those programs differ from those focused on adults?
Yeah, so we have virtual classes where we teach technique to children and adults. That's focused more on building technique and movement strategy. And we also have, outside of that, just for adults, our performing company, which is work and performance work that wouldn't be for kids or youth. But the educational component is for our children and adults. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely reach out to us. We have our teachers based in New York and California who identify and also have experience teaching a wide variety of deaf and disabled identities. And so let us know.
Great. Is there anything that's been surprising about doing this work?
I think that the only thing is, after doing it for a while, remembering that for some, it's some people's first days. And so continuing to notice that even though I feel as though I've been doing this work for a while, there's always still a little more to go, and to realize that everyone's at different points in their learning journey. And some people who don't even realize they need to be on a learning journey. And so that can definitely take one by surprise, and just to continue building that foundation and sending them on their own for resources they can do to further them along in their journey.
One final question from the audience. With such a diversity of identities, how do you maintain a culture of respect in your classes? As you say, people are in different places in their learning journeys.
Yeah, I would say that for classes are one-on-one, so it's really just a student and the teacher. So it's really an open space to be able to learn in that moment, and that it's as long as it's always said with respect and or apologies after unintentional harm, then that they'll be able to have conversations of why and continue to work from there. Within our performing company, people on their first day have a list of resources so that they're educated, not just on our organization and our philosophy, but other organizations to kind of get a view of the landscape and to be able to understand those core elements that are essential to being part of our organization. And then if they're unable to adhere to that or not have the desire to understand, then realize then that it's not a good fit. But usually after those first few days can be able to really understand, and if there's ever unintentional harm, depending on the harm, not always, but usually it's just apologies and having a conversation so that they can start to rectify that and make sure that that doesn't happen to others or in other spaces.
Thank you. Well, Ellice, thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great. I'm actually about to literally walk out the door to our studio and rehearsal right now. So thank you for having me. Hope to catch you virtually either this weekend or at a future Abilities Dance event. I hope you'll have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Ellice, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak with us today. And thank you, Noah, for moderating this wonderful conversation. Ellice, if you want to just post in again the link to the show, that would be great. And please, if anyone has any further questions, you can email at caryprograms@minlib.net, and I can forward that to Ellice. And thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good evening.